Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ASW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Welcome back, everyone, to Application Security Weekly. This is the news for the week of August 12th, 2018. And man, do we have a doozy. So late breaking news as of last night, I actually saw it from, I think it was Bob Rudis of Rapid7 posted something about Alibaba finding a vulnerability in Spark. So I took a look, and yeah, as of about a month ago, Alibaba Cloud Security team found a remote code execution vulnerability exploitable via the Spark REST API. Wow, like totally bad. Let me ask, Doug, how familiar are you with Spark in general?
I mean, I know what it is. I've never really worked with it. I mean, it's just a back-end server, that's processing jobs. So, I mean, it's basically, I'm familiar with that kind of development stuff. So I wouldn't claim to be a Spark expert, but yeah, I know what it is, and I know that it's widely used. So it's definitely a target.
I mean, for me, I am certainly not an expert in Spark either. It looks like it's, used in similar ways to Hadoop, for example. So yes. Large data sets, quick processing of that data, yep. Used for probably machine learning, et cetera. But ultimately what they found was, using Apache Spark, you could actually go ahead and connect to the web UI service, giving a REST API post request through port 6066. And in the article we linked under story number 1 for bugs, breaches, and more, it goes through the entire details of the exploit and how that all works. Now, given that currently there are 5,000 Spark servers with port 8080 exposed to the internet per this article, and they're pretty powerful servers, this is really, really bad. So if you're a listener, especially if you're a live listener of the show and you've got Apache Spark somewhere in your environment, stop listening, go deal with that.
Close those
that's going
ports
to be a problem
today, yeah. I mean, one of the problems I have with these kind of servers, and I've done some stuff with big data servers, is just that there's a lot of stuff going on there, and a lot of this stuff gets into production. And it's difficult to test all the pieces of it because, again, there's just so many things going on and stuff coming in and going out. And as a cloud got involved in things like this, it meant opening more ports. And there's a lot of connections to all those ports. So when somebody's looking through that kind of thing or just even trying to manage it, and again, one of the things I always talk about is lack of staff or whatever. You've got one person who's trying to solve this set of problems, one person trying to that set of problems, and there's nobody left to look at these, very basic problems, and you end up with ports open that shouldn't be open or whatever. But I mean, some of that just comes back to basic security hygiene. I mean, if you had those ports closed, then you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. But maybe they're not.
Well, and the other side of it is, right, like Apache is developed, and Spark is developed fairly well from a framework perspective. Nobody stopped to test the REST API for this kind of security flaw. Like,
it's
really?
It's complacency. Everybody thinks somebody else did it. So it's like you get in your car to drive it and you just assume that the starter switch is legit because it's always been there and there's always been one and nobody worries about it too much. And you figure, oh, well, somebody must have, found all the problems here. And then somebody figures out another way to come in the window.
Yeah, and in this case, they sure did. So
yep.
It looks like, what happened here was Alibaba's security team did some internal research and then managed to protect themselves against these vulnerabilities. And in fact, in the article, it does go through suggested remediations, such as simple things like restricting access to ports 8088, 8081, 7707, and 6066.
Yep.
Simple solution, right?
When I see that in remediation, it drives me crazy too. I mean, when I see a remediation that's something really sophisticated, I go, okay, well, that's tough. But when you see remediation to say, just close these ports, I'm like, really? Again,
Right.
we got to tell you that. We got to tell you to close these ports and not let anybody come in. And people are like, oh, we closed everything up to 1,024. I'm like, yeah, there's another 65,000 ports on top of that you aren't looking at. So maybe close some of those unless you really, really need them, and then monitor the real weird ones that you need.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, especially for this, right? Like, it's a situation of, this is a simple configuration thing, right? You set it up inside of your internal environment, and why does it need to talk over those ports externally? And if it does, can't we just do it over a VPN so it can stay internally truly? I don't know, other than to say, like, it's sad that that's the remediation, but also I get the feeling that with this kind of quality of bug, what will quickly happen is people will start looking at Spark a lot more closely over the next several months, probably because they're going to start thinking, okay, hey, we just finished with, besides Las Vegas Black Hat DEF CON, there's ShmooCon in January, and then there's, next year's conferences again. Now is hunting season for the next big exploit chain and all that other good stuff. Well, here you go. I mean, like, this is a simple one.
But I do call these evolutionary problems as well, because a lot of times what happens to people is their companies grow, and they grow from being small to medium to even big very quickly, and your teams don't necessarily grow at the same pace. So all of a sudden you've got someone responsible for this stuff. We need a solution. We need it now. I've seen this with Oracle, and no offense, Oracle. It was just because Oracle is so voluminous to install. But I saw this in a company, it's a pretty big company. They're putting Oracle in all over the place, and no one was addressing the security issues of Oracle, because all they really knew about was the security issues of what they had. And they were just trying to get Oracle in production. And it wasn't any fault of Oracle. It wasn't any fault of anyone. It was just an evolutionary problem that we went from a small scale operation to a very large operation. Nobody had a chance to really look at what are the implications of this and what things do we need to change because we've changed the way we do business. And then we get back to these just fix it. We got to go online in 3 hours, fix it. And it's like the easiest thing to do was open 1,000 ports because they didn't know what port it was and nobody had time to look it up. We'll fix it later. We'll do a full check next week. And then next week something else happens and nobody ever does a full check, and you got 1,000 ports open.
Right. It's nobody ever does the follow-up or the post-mortem and says, oh, by the way, did we check those things? Because we sure have a ticket that's open. And by the way, why is it in the backlog still? And like all those other problems that come about. But it's interesting to me as well, because again, this is a situation where I'm probably, I'm hopeful anyway, that in the documentation somewhere for setting this thing up, that it says, okay, by the way, make sure you restrict these ports on your, publicly facing, internet facing devices from where that you're going to run Spark off of. I'm willing to bet that if they even had it in the documentation, though, that most people probably didn't read it.
And it could be a residual, too. I remember when people were switching away, and you have switched away, right? Everybody switched away from FTP. But I remember people used to run FTP, and FTP ran, it ran on port 20, ran on port 21, but it also ran on these high-level ports. And you could configure it to run on port 3,000 or 5,000 or whatever ports you wanted to use for the transfers. And people put stuff like that in their systems. Nobody ever documented it because it was put in 25 years ago when they got rid of FTP. You got rid of FTP, right? When you got rid of FTP, that stuff was still laying there open in a firewall, and nobody ever went in and deleted it, and they haven't bothered to check because there's some weird port up there. And then somebody does check, and they go, ooh, these are weird ports. I wonder what they do. And everybody's afraid of them, and then all of a sudden they're left open. So
that is probably my number one, maybe my number two favorite bug in bug bounty hunting is open FTP to the internet and Telnet with anonymous login. It's probably my two favorite because they are easy to find in a scripted fashion. And most often for those older organizations, they are everywhere. And especially when you have anonymous, read-write access all over the place, depending on where it lives and what, permissions you're running as, not good. Especially if it's off of a web server. That's kind of the best worst scenario.
World writable anonymous FTP coming soon. Yeah, I have seen that so many times, and a lot of you are sitting there watching the show going, "Oh, come on!" And then you go out and you find it. You go out and you scan somebody, and you go, "What are these things open?" And you go look at that old server that's still sitting downstairs, that's trusted by everyone, because it was in the network when they built it, so it must be okay.
And nobody knows who owns it. That's the other problem. They're like, who do we actually go to ask that we can turn this thing off?
And I've seen them where they're off-site. I've seen them where a server's been moved off-site, and the server's sitting somewhere else, and then that kind of gets phased out, but it's still sitting out there. We saw one once where the thing was trusted. It was running over a VPN. It was sitting on another site. They had canceled the contracts with that company. They were no longer dealing with them, but they were still connected to them. And that server was still actually doing updates onto their system automatically. It was all scripted. It was all cron jobs, and it's just sitting out there somewhere doing it. And we were seeing it when we did the audit, and we're like, what is this stuff? And they're like, I don't know. And nobody that worked there was actually there when that was actually used. It was so long ago. And we went and found this thing, and the people are like, oh, it is? Well, we should turn that off because we didn't know that either. And you're just seriously?
People deprovisioning websites, but not deprovisioning the server that the website ran on. Another great example, right? You just call it by its IP address, and suddenly, things are still there that shouldn't be there. And yeah, that's a whole other world of problems. Speaking of things that shouldn't be there but are, Comcast had a breach or potential breach of up to 26 million customer records, including partial addresses and social security numbers. I mean, This seemed like it was kind of trivial to exploit based on the read up on it. What did you think of this, Doug?
Well, I mean, basically, it's convenience versus security. Security's always about the more security you have, the more inconvenient it is, and they were wanting end users to be able to sit there at home and put their credentials locally so they didn't have to continually connect, and that made it faster. And subsequently allowed a huge security flaw because people could get into those systems and pull down the credentials, and that allowed access. It's really frightening, but it's real common too.
The thing that I find hilarious and terrible about this article is it reads, again, so BuzzFeed News reporting on this wrote, the internet provider was quickly able to patch the flaws. First of all, you were quickly able to solve them. Why didn't you do that in the beginning? Secondly, they wrote, in a statement addressing the data breach, a Comcast spokesperson explained that it blocked the security vulnerabilities within hours, while also reaffirming the company's commitment to security. Quote, we quickly investigated these issues, and within hours, we blocked both vulnerabilities, eliminating the ability to conduct the actions described by these researchers. My guess, they added some firewall rules, and they blacklisted that activity, and there's probably 7 other ways to do it.
Of course. I'm so sorry, Senator. We never meant to do this. It was not intentional. I really am sorry. We took every precaution, but we missed a few. So yeah, that's the testimony that you get from that.
Oh, yeah, it took hours too. Like, come on, seriously? Like, if it takes hours to fix these things, it probably should have been found a lot sooner. And if it wasn't found a lot sooner, I'm glad that they reacted as quickly as they did. But at the same time, it's like, really, if it only took you a few hours under duress, imagine if you had done that just during the development phase and not had to deal with potentially lawsuits.
Even if you audited it. I mean, if you just regularly audited it, somebody should have caught that. If you were testing properly, they should have seen this before it ever became a problem and fixed it, but they didn't. So that just tells you where they are because, again, they got one auditor who's running around for 8 million systems who maybe doesn't even understand how this system works, and they go, could you log in? Yes. Could you log out? Yes. Check. Yeah, we're good. We're going to move on. And that's it.
Right. And what was interesting about this is there was 2 flaws specifically. One of the flaws was based on that in-home authentication page that you called out there. So a user is able to pay their bills without signing in, right?
Right.
And so the portal allowed customers to verify their account information based on partial home addresses suggested by the Comcast site itself, which is like, are they encrypting the data? Because if they are, they're able to decrypt. Like, that's another concern entirely. But if the device was or appeared to be connected to the home network, you could eventually go through and get the first digit of the street number and the first 3 letters of the correct street name, whereby now asterisks hide the rest of it. But then you could use IP address lookups to go ahead and determine the city, state, postal code, and then from there, the second vulnerability was via the sign up page for Comcast authorized dealers. You go ahead and put in the customer's billing address. You could brute force the last 4 digits of the customer's social security number because there was no lockouts or limitations on attempts for that functionality. Like, what? Really?
Evolutionary. It's the same thing. It's like we got an old server, we put it in play, somebody went in and set up an application on it, nobody bothered to check the settings on the server. Sometimes it's pieces of it, but it's just, and it works, and everybody says, yay, it works, let's release it, we're good to go. And then, nobody audits it, and boom, you get popped.
Yeah, trivial lockout mechanisms. I mean, same IP address requesting, 100 requests in all of 40 seconds. Maybe that's a problem. And maybe you should identify that.
But remember, until there's some kind of consequences for this stuff, it's just going to keep happening. What's the consequences here? zip, because what are Comcast customers going to do? Set up their own home cable TV network? Probably not.
Wish.
So, when Comcast gives you this notice, or whoever it is, I mean, we all get these notices constantly now. And, when the Office of Personnel Management, the federal government calls me and says, oh, yeah, we lost all your stuff. Sorry. We're going to sign you up for this ID theft service for 3 years that you're already a member of 12 times. And thank you. And we really appreciate your business. Bye. And, Or you get an even worse one where they go, we recommend that you contact your local Social Security office and request a new number. Here's the link to that site where you can fill out 9,000 pieces of paperwork, and maybe in 6 to 8 years, somebody will get back to you. We suggest you do that. I'm sorry, one more. This is really grinds my gears. Listen, the first one of these things I ever got was from a university, not Roger Williams University. It was a long time ago. The university suggested I go to my bank and change all my bank account numbers. So I had to go to the bank. They suggested I go to the Social Security office and request a new Social Security number. They requested that I change all of my passwords, logins, et cetera, the usual stuff. They gave hourly employees a half day off work to go do this, but they did not give salaried employees any time off to do this. And I was like, you really think we could do it? Even if I could do this in half a day, I'm going to go to the Social Security Administration in half a day? Really? That's your
get
answer?
A new number in half a day?
Yeah, it's like telling me to go to the DMV and get new license plates, and we're going to give you 3 hours off work to do that. And it's like, I can't even get to the desk in 3 hours at the DMV.
Right.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing to me. Pro tip for those that work in the U.S. government that are listening. What would be really great is if you had rotating Social Security numbers on a yearly basis as assigned and identified when you file your taxes. Like, suddenly you're no longer tied to one Social Security number every year. So your threat model is now a lot smaller, right? You only get breached within a year with a certain number. As opposed to, say they got records of data that was 5 years old. Well, guess what? Not your number. Doesn't matter
Or
anymore.
what if your Social Security number was a private key?
But then we'd have to worry about encryption, and encryption is bad, and we need to backdoor it.
Well, they'd have to build a backdoor into it so people could crack it. Yeah, and that would never cause a problem. Not ever. No way. That could go wrong. No way. Never be misused.
Speaking of banks and backdoors and problems, by the way, story number 2 under If You Build It, They Will Come. Facebook wants to work with banks to trade data. This sounds bad on a whole number of levels, Doug. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love it, because I can't wait to watch Mark apologizing for this next one. It's horrible. I mean, it just sounds so wrong. I mean, I know Facebook just keeps saying, oh, no, this will never be misused. There will never be any wrongdoing here. We would never sell your personal information for money. No, not ever. We're just trying to make life more convenient for you. I mean, and on the other side of it, it sounds good. It's like we're going to have you're going to be able to go to Messenger, and you're going to be able to do banking and get loans and do all this cool stuff that you want to do. Which I agree. I want to do those things. I want to be able to not go to some place and fill out a bunch of paper forms to get a home loan. That would be awesome. But I don't trust these guys anymore. I mean, they told me to trust them. I said, okay, I'll trust you a little bit. And they just slapped me in the face a couple of times with a dead herring and said, yeah, I'm sorry. We sold all your data to a couple of other companies, including some bad ones, and we didn't know they were bad. I swear we didn't know they were bad, but the money was good, and we did. Yeah, there were some drug dealers or something. I don't know, but we're all billionaires, and you're not so tough. And I don't trust them. I worry they're going to get in there, and I don't know what the security is with that. I can't believe banks would ever even agree to this, because I'm like, banks, really? Are you going to trust these guys and give them access to your systems and say, here, pull all this in, link into our systems with Facebook, which has never, ever had a problem ever before? This story I was like at my house just reading it and going, oh, no. I was really getting ready to pull up the delete for Facebook. I was like, if I didn't have all those family photos of me naked in Facebook, I would be deleting it right now.
So the funny thing is that apparently there are ways that you can download all of that data. In fact, just this past weekend, I was sharing this article as I was prepping for the show, showed it to my wife, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to go take care of that right now. And I haven't been on Facebook since 2013. She's been a little bit of a holdout. She's got Instagram and all that other stuff, which is kind of the new, I guess that's owned by Facebook technically, but
yeah.
it's where a lot of people are going to with photo sharing, right? And so I was like, she's like, yeah, I'll be right back. And she's like, okay, I've downloaded all of my photos and I've deleted my Facebook account. I was like, what, really? And she's like, yeah, everything so far, okay, not cool. This in all in the same year, this coming out, it was her last straw. So they're trying to work with JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and US Bancorp today. Basically, the article reads that they are actively asking financial services companies for financial transaction data in return for sharing data that they have gathered via Facebook with the banks. So all around, that sounds like just a bad idea. I mean, first of all, Facebook has a pattern of behavior at this point, right? Which is either they are so big as a company that it's one of three things. Either their developers are negligent, either their developers don't care, or either they're actively working to do this sort of thing and then coming back and saying they're sorry after the fact, right? And it could be any mix of those things, right? They could either be ignorant, negligent, or they honestly feel like they're doing a good thing and then the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or Mark Zuckerberg is just a evil lizard man that wants a bunch of money.
Well, let me tell you, one of the great fallacies of the modern age that we all have is that corporations are benevolent citizens. That is a huge fallacy in our society, that we look at a company and we say, that company is not evil. And I'm not saying they are evil, but we assume that they're good. When they're not good or evil, they're simply there to make money. And if they can make money, they will. And they answer to the shareholders, not the customers. So Facebook doesn't care about the customers. They care about the shareholders and the money. And as long as there are no consequences to this stuff's going to keep happening. In my big book of paranoia, think about it this way. AI is getting smart enough to look at photographs that you put online and extract information from those photographs, not just look at them and make that. They're starting to draw conclusions. So if you put a picture up and it shows you on a sailboat, AI is starting to get to a point where it can look at that and go, Doug has a sailboat. Doug must be interested in sailing. Doug must have enough money to have a sailboat. My sailboat's really cheap, and I don't even have it anymore, but there's a picture of me on there. Maybe I should try to sell Doug something else or sell Doug's information to Ukrainian sailing companies. I don't know, but that stuff scares me too, because Facebook is doing that. They're working on those Google's doing those kind of things, Instagram, and on and on and on. So I don't trust these guys. They make me really, really nervous because I don't think they're good. I don't think they're evil. I think they're just about money. And if a new thing comes along where they can make a bunch of money, they're going to do it, and then they'll apologize for it later.
Well, and here's the other thing, right? So now you make it easier on Facebook to do, financial transactions of different kinds when they've already had a history of not doing a very good job of protecting that data from like third parties being able to steal it via the APIs that Facebook made available to them. Suddenly you have a whole other world of problems because now guess what? The bad guys are going to go where the money is, which is your Facebook account.
Absolutely. And Facebook can further profile you with your transactions. So if they look at your records, they'll know how you live. They'll know, do you live from paycheck to paycheck, or do you have a whole bunch of money in your account? They can start profiling you further without ever releasing that data. They don't have to give it away, but they can really start pigeonholing you into groups. Now, there's a good side of that, is that you're pigeonholed into a group you want to be in, I guess. And, you get targeted with sailboat ads instead of ads for football tickets, which I don't care anything about. I do like sailboats. So if anybody wants to donate me one, I'll take it. But I don't care anything about football tickets. So I do like getting an ad about sailing rather than a football game. So I like some of it, but I also get really scared about it too, because I know there's psych people out there, and those psych people are sitting there and they're making evil little plans. Psych people are evil. I hate to tell you that, Keith. So it's good that you switched, but psych people are out there trying to figure out how to manipulate you. I mean, that's been going on since marketing day one. How do I get Doug to buy stuff he doesn't want or need? And I'm going to use psychology to do it. Add big data to that, and you sure got an awful nice psych workup of me, and you can predict all kinds of behaviors. Now, when I start getting ice pick and plastic tarp ads, I'll get worried about myself. So,
well, especially like who in your household is looking up ice pick and plastic tarp ads, for that matter.
Yeah, exactly.
But so it's interesting that you mentioned that for a few reasons, which is one of the biggest employers of psychologists today are in fact big technology companies.
Of course.
To your point, right? It's the addictive behavior that they're trying to actually build, more or less.
Oh yeah.
And then, of course, there have been other problems related to Facebook that we've mentioned, over the last several weeks on the show, which is issues that they've had with investigating third-party people grabbing data via their API, and all sorts of other problems related to big data. In fact, there was an article that I think James and I might have talked about it on one of the shows, where companies are now using metadata about you to determine your creditworthiness.
Right.
So, for example, if you use, and it might have been Paul instead, but if you use an iPhone versus an Android,
Yep.
or if you use an older iPhone versus a newer iPhone, right? Like all of those
Right.
things indicate your level of wealth, when you shop during the day or versus at night, on weekends, etc. Indicates, are you living paycheck to paycheck because you're buying everything on a Saturday morning,
Yep.
or are you shopping willy-nilly during the day for weeks on end, which says, your ability to kind of spend freely. So,
and there's a transference problem in there too, because the other part of this problem, to me, the way I see it, is we don't know how APIs will evolve or what will start being sold. So all of a sudden, some site company develops this really cool API that you can use as a library to examine your customers. Okay, nothing wrong with that. And then, Facebook buys that API company. It's got all this mechanism to access all these things. Maybe there's even evolutionary handles in there reaching out to databases all over the world that don't get removed, ports that don't get blocked. And then they sell this to somebody else, and that person goes, wow, look at all the stuff we can access here through this API. And they start pulling it down. And all of a sudden that data becomes like world known, and you'll never get it out of the world. Once it's out there and everybody's accessed it, it'll be in some other database somewhere else. So Facebook can apologize all day long, but your data's already been pulled down into some AI database. It's in Brazil. Good luck getting that thing back.
Right. Speaking of, pushing code and having problems related to those sort of things, the UK Home Office, under Learning and Tools #1, released a repo security scanning tool to find things like keys, any sort of sensitive passwords, etc. And so there are other tools like this out there. There's one called GitRob. I think it's written in Go at this point, and a few others. But I thought to myself, the UK Home Office released a pretty cool and useful tool, which is, hey, by the way, you're pushing your security stuff or your passwords and your sensitive information to public APIs or to APIs in general. Maybe they're still, privately held inside of your organization.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I mean, I've seen so much code in the past that contained, backdoors, all kinds of things that were built to the code, and it gets pushed onto GitHub, maybe as a development project, and it's put out there. Nobody knew it was in there. It could even just be commentary. This is a really nice tool to go out there and scan GitHub with it, see what you can find, because there may well be a root login embedded in some code somewhere, and it just never got pulled out, and all of a sudden it's like everybody's got it. That would be bad.
Yeah, hard-coded passwords, man. They happen so often, especially API related, right? If it's an API key, APIs are, on off, right? Like you've got an API key, you can pretty much do everything with that API key that the API allows you to do.
Yeah. I wrote a script. I just wrote a script once to scan my servers to look for SQL passwords, because that was the standard way people coded stuff a long time ago. Was they just, you hard coded everything into your SQL queries. So you had the username and password right there, hard coded in the code, and anybody could see it that knew what that was. And we used that stupid security threat obscurity model, where, only you nerds can figure this stuff out. And now, any 12-year-old kid can scan for anything. And so, hey, you download this tool and you go, and then that code gets uploaded onto GitHub and.
Right. Well, or it ends up in the logistics or for the actual documentation for the thing that you are using or buying. I did want to highlight the other two. I'm not going to talk about them at length, but the other two learning and tools: bypassing content security policy using polyglot JPEGs by Gareth Hayes.
That's a good one.
That was a really good one.
That is a really good article.
As well as the practical web cache poisoning by James Kettle, which was actually done at Black Hat this year. So I imagine those will be, or at least James's will be available via video where he talks about that at Black Hat in 2018. But yeah, both of those cool little articles from Portswigger, so the makers of Burp Suite Pro. I actually did want to mention, because you kind of brought it up in terms of security through obscurity. The article under "If you build it, they will come" #3. Hacker finds hidden God mode in old x86 CPUs.
Yay!
I thought this was cool, right?
Oh,
the way they got this.
Man, that was like porn for me. I read that. I was so excited to read that because I was like, look at how simple this is. It's amazing. I actually tried it on one of my Linux machines already. It didn't work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't have that chipset, but I thought I'm going to try this anyway because it's just too cool. I literally this afternoon, after you called me and said, "Can you come in?" I was like, I was reading the article. I was like, "Oh, I got to try this right now." I was actually a little late getting over because I was putting that into one of my servers. I was like, "Will this work?" Oh man, that's so cool.
Well, so the interesting thing is the way that they went about finding this vulnerability is they went and looked back at patent filings for different chipsets.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the language inside of those patent filings, they would kind of check out a number of different filings to determine, like kind of this, it's basically like they said it without saying anything. So it's almost the absence of these specific bits of language inside of these patent filings led to effectively this researcher kind of walking around this space or this gap inside of these several different patent filings and more or less discovered by nature of deduction that this RISC chip was hidden inside of the Nehemia via C3 Nehemia chips made in 2003. And so I think he was looking through the filed patents for US 8341419, which mentioned jumping from ring 3 to ring 0.
Right.
So he had indications that something like this existed, but didn't really know how. And this is truly what security research is, right? It's going through the documentation and realizing that there are things that are being discussed here that shouldn't exist.
And I'll tell you, if there was ever anything on the earth that represents the API problem, the cloud API problem, that little article right there is it. I mean, it's like, here's a thing in another thing. This thing's not secure. That thing is secure. We don't even know what that thing does. It's just something that's on there. We've been ignoring it for 10 years, but it's still there. And somebody goes out and finds, look, I can go through this to get to that. I mean, it's amazing. I was really excited about that article.
And I think that was also given as a talk last week as well out in Vegas. I don't know if it was Black Hat or if it was DEF CON or B-Sides Las Vegas, but I look forward to going and checking out this specific video when it comes available. So that was security researcher Christopher Domas. So it actually was given at Black Hat. So definitely check that as well. I do want to leave our listeners in this case with probably one of the funnier commit strips that I've seen lately, which is "Let There Be Lights." It's a play on artificial intelligence, automation, and of course a sysadmin who has some bug problems to deal with. So with that, Doug, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this week for another episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to git, commit, and stay classy.